It's February, and that means it's Black History Month. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today we're going to talk about some books for Black History Month. So I typically do a post like this every year, and I base it around some of my favorite books by Black authors. There are some repeats because there are some that I just can't help but tell you guys about because they're some of my absolute favorite books I've ever read. But yeah, I picked 5 for today. Keep it kind of short because I didn't want to like ramble. I didn't want to talk about like every book by every Black author that I've read because that would be a lot. So I just tried to pick ones that I just continue to think about. Ones that have never left me, will probably never leave me. They're ones I have enjoyed the most over the years. Some of them are pretty recent, and then some of them are coming out of the archive. So I love sharing books with you guys that are like from years ago. But yeah, make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week, and all we do on this channel is talk about books. If you like listening to people talk about books, here I am every week doing just that for you. Yeah, that's probably enough of an intro. I really don't have anything else to tell you guys, so let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. The first book on my list is Skye Falling by McKenzie. Y'all, I absolutely love this book. I read this, it's probably been 4 years now, 3 years now since I read this. I think about this book all the time. I think about it all the time. I still think about this book. And I constantly recommend this book to everybody, basically. So, premise of the book is we have a female main character named Skye. She lives a very nomadic life where she gets to travel a lot, but she has a home base. Oh shoot, now I can't remember where. I'll put it up here. And that's sort of where she finds herself when she's in between things. This is also where she grew up, where her family is that she's kind of estranged from. So she finds herself there in between trips, and while she's kind of there in between, she gets contacted by a young girl. I think she's like 13, and she finds out that she is her daughter. And it's kind of a funny story because obviously this is not Skye's daughter that she had herself, because she would have remembered having a baby. But Skye donated her eggs to a very close friend of hers that was trying to have a baby, and then her and Skye lost touch with each other, and that woman ended up having Skye's baby by in vitro fertilization from the donated eggs. And that is how the daughter ends up contacting Skye by saying like, hey, yeah, I was your egg, and now here I am, and I want to get to know you. And so Skye kind of sees her life getting turned upside down by the revelation of potentially being a parent or being of somebody that's important to somebody else, which is something that Skye has always kind of tried to avoid. This book has so many great things happening in it. We have so much diversity going on in this book. First of all, lots of BIPOC rep, beautiful BIPOC rep across the board. And then we have a lot of rainbow rep in this book that was done really well. We also have a lot of found family themes in this book, which were done extremely well. On top of that, we have lots of discussions about race, inclusivity. We also have police brutality, gentrification, living in blended families, self-identity, things like that. So many good things happening in this book. And just on top of that, boatloads of trauma. Skye is a walking trauma bomb, okay? And we really get into it in a lot of different ways, and I absolutely love the way McKenzie handled this book. This will be my all-time favorite McKenzie book. I have not been able to get other books by her, but I don't think she would ever top Skye Falling for me, honestly. I don't think there's many books that would top Skye Falling, period, for me. This book delivered on every level, and I've absolutely loved it. The next book on my list is Thirsty by Jas Hammonds. Okay, I've talked a lot about Jas Hammonds on my channel lately because I just read this book last summer, and I feel like I've talked about it almost every month since then because it's honestly brilliant. All right. We have a female main character who is in the summer of her freshman year of college. So she's just graduated from high school and she's getting ready to go to college. She has her girlfriend with her. She has her little friend group that she hangs out with. And in the midst of this summer, getting in between high school and freshman year, her and her girlfriend decide to pledge the Serena Society, which is a secret society for Black women. It's a very big deal to be like invited to pledge. And so basically they're spending their whole summer going through the pledging, and I mean, it's pledging, so it's kind of brutal. And this is sort of their story of getting through that summer. On top of just the harshness of the pledging ceremonies and things like that, our main character is also dealing with coming from a blended family. She feels very unseen in her house. Her parents struggle with her gayness, I would say. They weren't as accepting as she was hoping, and it's been hard for her to adjust. So a lot of this has to do with like her family trauma and how she's dealing with that. But the other part of this book is about how she's dealing with drinking, and that she uses drinking to sort of mask a lot of her other issues. And as she starts pledging for the society, her drinking becomes increased, you know. And we kind of see in real time her spiraling out of control and losing her edge and her grip on her life. This book also had so many great conversations. I mean, we're talking about a lot of not found family, but more like found community. I think her name is Blake, now that I think about it. Blake finds herself very lost in her identity as a Black woman because her mother is not Black. She struggles with that, and she doesn't know who to have these conversations with, and she wants to have strong Black women present in her life, and she sees the Serena Society as the ability for her to finally get that community that she's so desperately wanting. And as we're going through that, she's searching for that, and she's also getting lost in a lot of other things. Lots of found family, lots of rainbow rep across the board in this book as well. Addiction is mentioned a lot in this book. I just think there was a lot done so well about this book. I did it on audio and I loved it. Honestly, the narrator for this was just fantastic. I love this book. I have looked more into Jas Hammonds since I've read this book, and her other books are really hard to get. But I'm not done with Jas Hammonds, but I loved this. The next book on my list is One Night in Georgia by Celeste Norfleet. First of all, okay, I found this book at the library. It was on a Black History Month display, and the cover of this book completely drew me in. Like, you can't tell, I mean, this cover is fantastic, but like, you can't tell in the picture, but it's also kind of like got this psychedelic edge to it. Like, the printing on it is done like in shiny foil as well. It's really well done. Okay, it was really beautiful, very eye-catching when I walked by it, and I looked it up and I checked it out from the library because I was really interested in it. This book blew me away. Okay, so let's talk about it in a minute. We have a set of friends. It's 1968, and it's their senior year of college, and they decided that when they first met, when they were freshmen, that on their senior year, they were going to drive from their homes in New York City to their last year of college, and I think it's in Virginia. I think that's where they're going to school, is in Virginia. I'll have to look it up to double check. So they promised each other they would go on this road trip. Well, now it's 1968. Things are really difficult in the country right now, especially for Black people, and especially unsafe for Black women. But they decide, you know what? We're going to go. And this is their story of their road trip from New York City to Virginia, I believe, in 1968 in the summer. Lots of good things about this book. So I am gonna break it down for you a little bit, okay? I know I normally try not to get too much into it, but it is really interesting the way that Norfleet put this together. So we have three friends, okay? And they come from three very different classes, I would say, and three different upbringings. They're also like varying degrees of representation, I would say, which makes it like really interesting. There's a lot of really cool conversations happening here. The one in the picture with the big afro, she is our main character, And she comes from a very heavy civil rights family. Her father is like praised for being one of the leaders of the civil rights movement, and she tragically watched him die when she was a child at the hands of white police officers. So she is also very, Black Power movement. She is also a very big civil rights champion. And then we have another friend who comes from a very wealthy Black family. And she is, I would not say the opposite of our main character, but she's been raised with a little bit more privilege that the money that her family has made has provided her. And that's a very interesting socioeconomic look, because Black people were not historically wealthy in 1960s. And so to see her family be very wealthy but still coming up with challenges was very interesting. And to see how she kind of lives in her bubble most of the time, and when she's taken out of her bubble, it's hard for her to live in the world with other women of color. And then we have our very last character. She is from the South, I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly. And she is kind of like the dirty secret of her family. She has a predominantly white family. And then her father, I believe, is Black. And so she is actually very white passing, which does cause her some issues growing up. And it also causes her issues traveling with these two other Black women, because she is considered so white passing. I also talked about socioeconomic class. Like I said, the one character comes from a very wealthy family. Our main character, I would say they're very middle class, very average. And then our third character, she came from a very poor background. So there's a lot of conversations about that as well. So we have a lot already happening on the page, right? Before they go on their little road trip, our main character's stepfather says, you have to go with a chaperone. And so he finds friend of a friend, something like that. Their son is like on military leave, and he decides to go with them and chaperone the girls. So we're going from New York City to Virginia, which means we're passing through Washington, D.C., where they're having a lot of marches and things like that, which was very exciting to see. And then we're passing through the South, which is dangerous. There were times they got stopped by the police, and there was a time when they got stuck in a sundown town in the South and they couldn't actually leave. So this story has a lot happening, okay? A lot of representation, a lot of discussions about race, civil rights, etc. If any of those topics are interesting to you, or any historical value in the South at that time regarding civil rights movements and things, this book will be very interesting for you. It is quite heavy, okay? There are a lot of rough things happening in this book, a lot of degrading language, and a lot of bad situations that our group finds themselves in, like a lot. A lot of people in the review section for this book complained about the love interest line in this book. I loved it. Okay, personally, I really liked the love interest side story that was in this book. I would not say it took up the whole book. The whole book to me was about this group of women and this young man taking this road trip through the South. It was like a historical roadmap, I would say, of what things were like in 1968. And like I said, tons of interesting side conversations happening along the way. I think this was really well done, and I still think about this book all the time. I still think about it. And I think the hard thing about reading a book like this is seeing the parallels to today. Obviously, it's not as bad as 1968, when the civil rights movement was really up and going, and there was a lot of change happening very quickly in the country, but there are still parallels. There are still sundown towns. There are still places like this. I know people like to think that we've come so far, when we really just haven't come far enough. We haven't come far enough. And yeah, it's hard to read that and still see the similarities. But sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's good to see that we haven't done enough, that we need to keep going, we need to keep pushing, we need to keep changing, and we need to keep standing up. So yeah, loved this one, okay? The next book I'm going to talk about is Jackal by Erin E. Adams. If y'all been on my channel a minute, you know I love this book. Love this book. And I am waiting so impatiently for Erin E. Adams to drop another book. This was her debut novel. I read it 2 years ago. Girl, she needs to drop another book because 2 years ago, Miss Adams, please put another book out because this one was phenomenal. This is the only one on the list that's a horror novel, and Erin E. Adams is a terrific horror writer. Okay, so we're following our main character who has made it a point to not return to her small, predominantly white southern town. Okay, but she comes back because her best friend in her life is getting married. She says, I'm going to go home. I'm going to stay one night for the wedding, and then I'm going to leave again. She does not like being there. This is set in Appalachia, white Appalachia, which, if y'all know anything about me, I love the whole folklore vibe that is centered around that area, and this plays into that really well. The thing about this town is a lot of black girls go missing, and a lot of it ties to the woods and things that live in the woods. If a book had a definition, or if there was a definition of if you see something, no you didn't, it's this book. Because if you saw something, look away. Pretend like you did not see that because you're probably not supposed to see it. That is the epitome of this book. So she goes home for this wedding, and she knows the woods have a tendency to be a bad place for black girls. A young girl that is part of the wedding party that is very close to our main character goes to the edge of the woods and she disappears. And as history knows of this town, it is only a matter of time before that young girl will never be seen again or is found dead. And it's up to our main character to try and find her before she's missing forever or turns up dead. Tons of historical stuff in this book, okay? I went and looked, I read the author's notes afterwards, because Erin E. Adams is actually from this town that the book is written about. And she made an author's note about it, and I read it, and she talked about how she grew up in this town and that there's a lot of historical value in her writing. I went and looked up this town, you guys, and her historical writing is perfect. She did her research, okay? It wasn't just some hometown, like, pulling memories, you know, from her time growing up there. She dug into the history of her town, the history of the people, of what's happened there, and she transferred it to this book in a really beautiful way. Okay, I loved the historical value of this piece. I also loved the Appalachian folklore in this piece, like horror folklore. Oh, I love that, okay? And she really hit the nail on the head here. Lots of really good conversations happening in this book about generational trauma, as well as just like the folklore edges of this, and also just historically how difficult it was for black people to live in this town and how they still did. They still continued to do it, even though they knew it was difficult to do. I really don't know what else to say about this book because I adored it. I think about this book all the time. I think about Erin E. Adams all the time, and I'm being so patient. I'm waiting so patiently for her to put out her next book because this was truly a masterpiece. Like, so many good conversations, so much good history. The folklore was amazing. The gore was so good. She hit the nail on the head with this, okay? It's perfect. Okay, the last book on my list is Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. Okay, y'all heard me talk about Tiffany D. Jackson on my channel before. I've read quite a bit of Miss Jackson's books, and this is my favorite one. Okay, I knew I had to put her on the list today because she writes so many good books, but this was my favorite one. This is my favorite one of hers. I haven't read all of hers yet, so, you know, I'm getting there. But so far, this is my favorite one that she's done. This is about a young black girl that ends up getting picked up by a very big record label, or a very big singer with a record label. And he kind of takes her under his wing while she's still in high school, takes her on the road, takes her on tour, says, I'm going to cut albums with you, I'm going to do all this stuff with you. And she finds herself in a very secluded, demanding, controlling, captive type situation with this singer. And she also finds out that she's not the only one in this situation. She's not the only one that's been told that she's special, that she's beautiful, that he's going to make her a star. And it all kind of starts to unravel. And she has to figure out a way to get out. All the time, her family is like trying to keep track of her, trying to find her, trying to get her out of this situation, trying to bring her home. And there's a lot of conflicting things that are keeping her from doing that. And one of them is her herself. She's saying, I don't want to come home. And then it becomes a point where she can't come home even if she wants to. This book is messed up. Okay? If you know Tiffany Jackson and her writing, you know that she bases a lot of her writings off of real court cases, real things that happen, and she fictionalizes the story. I'm not going to say too much about this because she does not say too much about this, but in her author's notes, she said, this book is not about Diddy, but F Diddy. That's all I'm going to say on that matter. If that whole thing interests you, okay, I know what Ms. Jackson said, okay? I don't believe her. And I don't believe that that person is the only person that has done this to young girls, young boys in this industry. I don't think he's the only one that has been accused. I don't think it's just one person that's done this to literally thousands of people. So yeah, if that storyline of that interests you, this would be very good. This is also one of my favorite books because Tiffany Jackson sometimes yanks me around with the endings of her books. You know, sometimes I feel like I was left on the edge of a cliff. Very ambiguous type endings. She was not ambiguous here, and it had a perfect ending, okay? And I loved her for that, and that is one of the reasons it's my favorite book, is because it really came full circle in the end, and it had a proper ending that I absolutely adored. Yeah, this is my favorite one. But very graphic, very sad, so much trauma, lots of grooming and things like that. If you can't handle storylines like that, please skip this one because it is very heavy. You will feel a lot with this book. That's just how Tiffany is, though, okay? You feel everything with her book. She's a tremendous writer. You will feel it all. I'm warning you. I've warned you. You will feel it all, okay? But I love this one. Okay, that's all I have for you guys today. These are my top 5, okay? My top 5 favorite books by Black authors. I absolutely love all 5 of these books. Now, I will apologize because when I was making the list and when I was done with the list, I don't have any books on this list by male authors. And I'm sorry, I do apologize for that. Typically, I think I talked about this in one of my posts like a while ago. I don't read books by male authors that often anymore. I really don't. And I know I need to. I did read one in February by a Black male author, and we will get into that. It's a really good example of why I don't read male authors in general. So I'll be excited to talk to you about that. And the February wrap up. Yeah, I don't read male authors that often anymore. It's very hit and miss with male authors for me, so I've just sort of steered clear. I don't know. So if you have any books by male authors, or specifically Black male authors or men of color that you would like to share with me that are some of your favorites, please do that. Because yeah, it's really hard for me to find male authors I actually like and that I want to continue reading. Yeah, so if you have any recommendations, leave those for me. I hope you found something new to read, and remember, you can diversify your bookshelf every month. I just like to put a spotlight on some of our Black authors for Black History Month. I will continue to celebrate it on this channel, and happy Black History Month to everyone that is celebrating. I am trying to up the number of books that I'm reading by BIPOC and POC authors this year, so I think my goal is like 10, which doesn't seem like that many, but it's literally a quarter of the books that I'm going to read for the year. So yeah, I think that's decent. I know we could do better, but I'm going to commit to trying to hit 10 this year. So yeah, make sure to hit all the buttons down below so you know I'm posting. I post every week, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave me a comment, tell me everything about books, tell me everything about everything. I love hearing from all of you, and I will see you all next time. Bye.